plot of land on the Mount of Olives, and 5 red heifers. All these elements are in place for what some Jews and Gentiles believe is the key to building the third Jewish temple.
Red heifers, to be precise. Some Jews and Christians believe they're the key to rebuilding the historic Jewish temple in Jerusalem.
These are the red heifers that landed at Israel's Ben Gurion Airport. Rabbis believe the ashes of a red heifer are necessary for purifying priests to serve in a future temple.
In Jewish tradition, the red heifer sacrifice is a major purification ritual. Using the ashes of the red heifer, people were cleansed of impurities from contact with a corpse. Since the time of Moses, only 9 reared heifers have been offered as sacrifices. With a 10th sacrifice looming, many people are recalling a prophecy that suggests such a sacrifice could signal the end of the world. What is the red heifer sacrifice? Is there any connection between it and the end of the world? Join us as we look at the red heifer sacrifices and their significance over the centuries. The red heifer intriguing prophecies. The red heifer prophecy is tied to the belief that the sacrifice of the red heifer heralds the arrival of the last days and is a necessary condition for the second coming of Christ. Jewish tradition notably awaits the 10th red heifer, which is thought to be required for the purifying rites connected to the reconstruction of the Third Temple in Jerusalem. Let's review the background information regarding the red heifer and its prophecy. This prophecy has to do with the rebuilding of the Temple in Jerusalem, which is known as the Third Temple. The original temple was built by Solomon and destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BC. Herod built the Second Temple, which stood during the time of Christ and was destroyed by the Romans in 7080. Since then, no new temple has been built in Jerusalem, and Jews have been waiting for the chance to build the Third Temple because they believe it will herald the arrival of the Messiah. However, there is currently a major issue with the Third Temple, which has been prophesied to be rebuilt numerous times in Scripture. When the Romans ruled most of the world, they drove the Jews away from Jerusalem. Jews did not return in significant numbers for almost 2 millennia. In the interim, Muslims settled in the area and constructed a mosque and a shrine atop what are believed to be the remnants of the ancient Jewish temples. Muslims hold that Muhammad, their revered prophet, left his footprints on a rock that is guarded by the dome of the rock after ascending to heaven on a holy voyage. For Muslims, this location ranks 3rd in the world as their most holy place. Jews have been returning in droves to Israel and Jerusalem, which is thought to be their most holy site on earth, as it is the sacred land that was originally given to Abraham. They did so after Moses led them there, following their captivity in Egypt. While they were building the tabernacle in the wilderness, they were given the law of Moses, which contains the 613 commandments, as found in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. This was because Israel refused to follow the higher law. The Para Aduma, or red heifer, is the subject of one of the 613 Jewish laws. It is described in great detail in Numbers 19, 2 through 10. According to Jewish law, this ritual must be carried out to purify the people, to prepare them for temple worship. When it talks about a red heifer, it doesn't mean a ruby red cow. Rather, it means a brownish red, which is not particularly rare. Finding one that's not disqualified is what has proven to be difficult. For whatever reason, the cow has to be at least 2 years old and fully red by the time it reaches its 3rd year of life. Even 2 different colored hairs near each other or 3 hairs spaced widely apart will disqualify it. A red heifer is disqualified for any physical flaws that disqualify sacred animals, and any work done on it will also disqualify the cow. In this instance, work even encompasses a person resting on it or covering it with clothing, with the only exception being that the animal was covered to protect it. It is also quite uncommon to discover a qualifying red heifer because placing a yoke on the cow disqualifies it even if it does not do any work. It is also grounds for disqualification if the heifer is pregnant or even if a male has mated with it. The Mishnah, the Jews' oral tradition, is where most of these specifications are found. These specifications are not found in the Torah, which is composed of the first 5 books of the Old Testament, or the books of Moses. If the heifer grows too old, even at 4 or 5 years old, other colored hairs start to grow, which disqualifies it. Rabbis search these animals, constantly looking for flaws that will disqualify them. The performance of this ritual is very painstaking, even if a red heifer is found to qualify. Since Moses lived approximately 3,300 years ago, this ritual has only been performed 9 times, the first of which was under the supervision of Moses himself, and the last of which was more than 2,000 years ago before Christ's mortal ministry. Jews believe that the construction of the Third Temple, which is necessary for the arrival of the Messiah, will begin with the 10th sacrifice of a red heifer. However, earlier traditions hold that the Messiah himself will carry out the sacrifice. Christians think that the temple in Jerusalem needs to be rebuilt before Jesus Christ returns. Most Jews, on the other hand, think that the red heifer sacrifice is the first step toward building the temple. Based on the requirements of the Book of Numbers, chapter 19, and the oral tradition in recent years, the Temple Institute, an organization devoted to preparing for the reconstruction of the Third Temple in Jerusalem, has been trying to discover red heifer candidates for decades. 3 candidates were reportedly identified by the Institute in 1997, 2002, and 2018. However, all 3 were quickly disqualified. At the moment, the world is focused on September 2022, when 5 red heifers were brought in from the United States with the assistance of an American farmer and evangelical Christian named Byron Stinson. Since then, one of the 5 has been declared ineligible, while the other 4 are still being observed. Interestingly, these red heifers had something to do with the October 7th, 2023 attacks in Israel carried out by Hamas. According to Abu Obaida, the organization's military spokesman, the attack was justified by their desire to destroy the 5 red heifers to disrupt Jewish rituals. It is important to note that a total of 695 people lost their lives in the attack, 36 of whom were children. The plan is to build the temple on the Mount of Olives, since the location of the red heifer sacrifice must be east of where it is needed. 12 years ago, a piece of property overlooking the Temple Mount on the Mount of Olives was bought specifically for this purpose. The owner of the site is Rabbi Yick Mamo, who collaborated with Byron Stinson to bring the 5 qualified red heifers to Israel. The heifers are very close to entering their 3rd year, allowing them to be used for the ritual. Many people are expecting the ritual to take place soon before the heifers grow too old and are unable to be used for such a sacrifice. The Temple Institute has stated that they hope to perform the ritual soon. The land directly east of the Temple Mount, which was purchased 12 years ago, meets both of these requirements for the red heifer ceremony. In a recent public appearance, Mamo stated that, "We are very close to the 3rd year of these cows." Last month, All Israel News reported that the Temple Institute wants to perform a sacrifice before Passover 2024. A massive altar has already been constructed to carry out the ceremony, according to those working on the project. The Jewish people will celebrate Passover on April 22nd this year. Some people think that since March 29th is the Sabbath of the Red Heifer, the sacrifice could take place earlier. However, the Temple Institute itself maintains that they are still waiting to hear from God regarding whether or not this is the appropriate time to make the sacrifice. Let's take a look at how the sacrifice of the red heifer is supposed to be carried out by the Jewish people as laid down in the Book of Numbers, the ultimate sacrifice of the red heifer. One of the most important and least known sacrificial rules in the Old Testament is the law of the red heifer, which may be found in the 19th chapter of the Book of Numbers. Like all other sacrifices, this one was entrusted to the children of Israel to serve as a perpetual statute, meant for people who come into ritual uncleanness by contact with a corpse, to finally guide them toward the Messiah. According to Jewish tradition, only Moses fully grasped this chukat, or commandment, which is to be followed even if it is not fully understood. God gave Moses the instruction to have the children of Israel produce a red heifer, which the Book of Numbers describes as being spotless, blemish-free, and without ever having a yoke placed upon it. The purpose of the heifer sacrifice was to purify Israel from the filth of the dead or Levitical defilement. It was a special sacrifice for various reasons. Unlike other sin offerings, this one was offered outside the camp or sanctuary, was completely burned, and was made once for all the children of Israel, or as long as its ashes lasted. Also, in contrast with the majority of other sin offerings, the red heifer law's sacrificial animal was a female, the para aduma. This choice of using a female expresses an amazing message, as it implies that life is given by the ceremony. The priest selected to carry out the ceremony, typically the senior son of the high priest, stayed in the temple 7 days before the offering and was regularly doused with the ashes of a previous sacrifice. The red heifer would be led by the priest in his white priestly garment to the appointed place, or sacrificial altar, where the elders of Israel would be waiting on the day of the sacrifice. The red heifer would then be bound with its face facing west toward the temple and slaughtered with the right hand of the priest, capturing part of its blood in his left after placing it into an aperture in the pile of wood built from cedar, pine, and fig trees. Then, dipping his finger into the blood, he would spray it 7 times straight into the temple's most holy place. The priest would then start the fire and add crimson, hyssop, and cedar wood to the center of the blazing flames. The burned remnants would then be picked up by a clean priest and placed outside the camp. Incidentally, the priest who offered the heifer as a sacrifice becomes unclean as a result of the offering. Then, when the ashes are required for ceremonial cleansing, some of them would be put in a container, combined with spring water and hyssop, and sprinkled on the unclean on the 3rd and 7th days following their interaction with corpses. Throughout history, specifically during the time from Moses to the Second Temple's collapse, just 9 red heifers were slaughtered. Moses prepared the first, Ezra the second, Simeon the just, and Johanan the high priest prepared 2 each, and Elioenai, Ben-Hakkaiah, Ananias, and Ishmael, Ben-Fabuz prepared 1 each, according to the Mishnah Bara's account of them. Just how important is the red heifer? The red heifer is very important. All 3 of the Abrahamic religions, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, have been closely following the red heifer prophecy. This is one of the few prophecies that affect all 3 of these religions. After all, they all consider Abraham to be a prophet and the founder of their respective religions. Since Muslims make up 25% of the world's population, Christians make up 31.6%, and Jews make up 2%. This prophecy has a very substantial impact on more than half of humanity. The red heifer has been carried out only 9 times in history, and there is a huge significance about the 10th sacrifice. The belief is that the sacrifice of the red heifer will herald the arrival of the last days and is a necessary condition for the second coming of Christ. However, the significance of this event varies amongst religions. Because of this significance, the Jews want to start the process of rebuilding the temple on the Temple Mount to pave the way for the Messiah. Both Christians and Jews hold to the prophecy regarding the coming Messiah. The Bible predicts that After Jerusalem's temple is rebuilt, it will come under siege, a scenario known as Armageddon. But at the last second, Christ descends to the Mount of Olives, and as his toe touches it, the mount splits in half, causing a massive earthquake that destroys the invading army and saves the Jews. At this point, the Jews realize that Jesus Christ is their Messiah and become Christians. They see the marks on his hands and feet. The remainder of the prophecy is found in Zechariah chapter 13, verse 6, which states, "And one shall say unto him, What are these wounds in thine hands? And he shall answer, Those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends." Many Christians hold on to the red heifer prophecy because they think it must occur before the temple is rebuilt, which is a prerequisite for the second coming. This is true, but what they frequently forget is that when Christ arrived during his mortal ministry, he declared that he fulfilled the law of Moses, which meant that followers of Jesus were no longer required to observe the law of Moses, which would have included the sacrifice of a red heifer. Since the red heifer is symbolic of the Savior Jesus Christ, most Christians have not given this much thought, but the red heifer prophecy has been fulfilled in its entirety. The problem is that the Jews continue to believe in Jesus and therefore follow the law of Moses, even though the traditional belief is that the Savior himself would offer the 10th red heifer sacrifice, the 9th being before his ministry. Therefore, even if this ritual is not necessary from a Christian standpoint, it will probably be carried out at some point, since Jews believe they must make this sacrifice to build the third temple in the holy city of Jerusalem. However, many fear that this sacrifice could spell the end of the world as we know it, given the challenges of undertaking such a sacrifice. Can a red cow cause Armageddon? Taking a look at a view of the Temple Mount from the summit of the Mount of Olives, one can see that the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque are located on the Temple Mount, which is where most people think the original temples existed. Christians are waiting to see what happens because they believe these events must occur before Jesus Christ returns, while Muslims maintain control of the Temple Mount and have built their sacred structures there. Jews believe they have the right to the Temple Mount for their temple, since there is adequate room for both religions. Some have even suggested that they split the territory. However, as you can understand, neither party is ready to do so. Therefore, throughout the ages, ethnic centers for Jews, Muslims, and numerous Christian religions have been built inside the walls of Jerusalem. Even now, when you visit Jerusalem, you can stroll through the Muslim, Christian, and Jewish neighborhoods because these are areas set aside for the various ethnic groups trying to coexist in the city. In certain areas, you have to pass through security checkpoints manned by military guards to enter the city or particular locations. For decades, Third Temple movements by Jewish groups aimed at fulfilling the building of the Third Temple have been organized and prepared for. They have even created furnishings, utensils, and priestly robes for the use of the future sanctuary. Almost annually, on Jewish holidays, these groups have attempted to push their way onto the Temple Mount to pray, which is against the law. Israeli security personnel have continuously had to turn them away, but in recent years, a growing number of Jews have started a wider campaign for the freedom to pray atop the Temple Mount, which is against the early 1967 status quo agreement over the location. The Muslims view this as a desecration of their third most holy site in the world. While the Jews believe the Muslims have been trashing their site for centuries, the Christians also believe the temple needs to be rebuilt before the second coming of Jesus Christ. Palestinian Muslims have responded with both protests and violence, as well as the threat of a potential new intifada or uprising. Consider how many different religions have diverse beliefs, yet there is one particular event that they all believe in. Some want this event to happen, while others do not. This kind of historical topic of contention can be extremely dangerous. One such topic of contention is the red heifer prophecy. So when commentators and internet celebrities claim that a cow could start World War III, they are not kidding around. For this reason, people are concerned that the current conflict in Israel could turn into Armageddon because that is what is predicted, and a red heifer will likely be sacrificed to start it all. Some Jews even pray for war, believing it is time to remove Muslims from the Temple Mount. Some Jews are aware of the potential political impact that sacrificing a red heifer could have on global affairs and even spark a war. However, this does not guarantee that war will break out or that Jews will immediately seize control of the Temple Mount. Instead, many believe that it could serve as a call to arms for all Jews to take over the Temple Mount to begin the process of rebuilding the temple. It is important to remember that the red heifer is only the first step in this process. There would still be a need to build the temple after that, and there are numerous prophecies about what would happen to it. After Armageddon, Christ saves the Jews and they become Christians. But even that isn't the second coming, despite what many people think, where Christ returns in glory and the wicked are burned. So there are still several things that must occur before the second coming of the Savior, but hopefully you can now understand why so many people on the internet are fretting over global affairs. One architect's theory seeks to prevent World War III by refuting the claim made by the Jews that the Muslims constructed their mosque, Dome of the Rock, on the Jews' holy ruins. Evidence that could stop the fight over Jerusalem. Resolving the Temple Mount issue is necessary to bring about peace in the Middle East. If Tuvia Sagiv, the author of a revolutionary theory, is correct in his assertion about where the Holy Temple stood, then he has the potential to be a significant peacemaker. The prevailing knowledge states that the Dome of the Rock was constructed over the Holy of Holies made by the ancient Jewish temple. Sagiv works as an architect, but his passion is the Temple Mount, and he has made some groundbreaking discoveries regarding the location of Solomon's temple. Sagiv's straightforward conclusion is that the ruins are not beneath the dome as generally believed, and more questions need to be asked about where the most reasonable place the temple could have been. Although his theory is complex, it is based on three primary pieces of evidence. 1. Architectural footprint. 2. Infrared photos. And 3. Water flow. Looking at Sagiv's theory, we discover that one of the temple's challenges was the supply of water for the high priest's holy bath, and the need to clean the court from the blood of every sacrifice. Since many animals were offered as sacrifices, there was a lot of blood in the court which needed to be cleaned up. The primary purpose of the temple was sacrifice, and it was performed so frequently that the priest required an aqueduct to pump water into the temple to wash away the blood. Archaeologists believe they have located the aqueduct, but if the aqueduct is where they think it is and the temple was located where the dome is, there is a big problem. According to Sagiv, the aqueduct is 20 meters lower than the rock's dome, and since water does not flow uphill, it is impossible that the temple was in the spot where the dome of the rock currently stands. This means that the temple must be leveled for the water from the aqueduct to supply the court, therefore the temple must be somewhere else. The majority of archaeologists, rabbis, and historians disagree with Sagiv's theory. It is customary to construct sacred locations atop one another. For example, churches were built by conquistadors atop Mayan temples. Naturally, the Dome of the Rock would be built over the Jewish temple. The Vatican is located atop the pagan temple of Cybele and Attic. This narrative takes us to the second piece of evidence Sagiv provides, the architectural imprint. The building of holy places follows customs and traditions. We know this from archaeological evidence because people don't just go and build a holy place, regardless of what religion they practice. When they are building a church or a mosque, they build it upon the existing holy place, and that is a tradition. Now that we know this, how is it possible that they ignored the temple's exact spot and built 2 mosques somewhere else instead? The story goes that after the Jewish temple collapsed, the Romans built a pagan temple on the site, which the Muslims later built on top of. This pagan temple is long gone, but the same architect later built another temple in Lebanon, which was built during the same period and even dedicated to the same god, Jupiter. Based on this, we can speculate that the temple in Lebanon may have served as a model for the lost Roman temple on the Mount. And guess what happens when we compare the layouts of the Temple Mount and the Jupiter temple? It is simple to see that the mosque under the dome and the Jupiter temple in Baalbek, Lebanon, are identical. Therefore, it is probable that the Dome of the Rock is the remains of the Jupiter temple, which the Arabs opted to cover with Muslim clothing and turn into a mosque. If the Muslims never built their mosque on the Jewish temple, then where is it? We have the answer straight from the horse's mouth. According to historians, the Roman temple had a horse statue between the 2 main temple buildings. The statue used to stand in the courtyard, and that area where trees now stand represents the location of the Jewish holy place. To put the horse on the Holy of Holies means that the Romans were saying they conquered the Jewish temple. Jews in Israel have had debates about whether the temple is merely a metaphor and whether God will create a physical temple, or if man will build it. One individual has a different idea about how to bring about peace in the area. He believes he must clear the way for the 3rd Jewish temple. The individual is named Gershon Solomon, and he thinks that returning to the Temple Mount is a historical justice because the Arab control of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem cannot last forever. He marched on the Temple Mount 15 years ago and now leads the Temple Mount Faithful, an organization committed to restoring the temple that the Romans destroyed more than 2,000 years ago. When asked how he thinks the 3rd temple can be constructed at the location of the dome, he revealed something quite fascinating. As a huge favor to Muslims, Gershon wants the government to remove the dome and return it to Mecca. He claims that when the Aswan Dam was constructed, the ancient temples in Egypt were relocated, often hundreds of kilometers from their original location in a similar fashion. Typically, just a few dozen people participate in Solomon's marches, but in 1990, when word got out among Palestinians that Gershon Solomon was making his way to the Dome of the Rock, riots broke out, costing the lives of 17 people due to the threat of violence. Politics and religion keep everyone from excavating this sacred ground. Sagi then took to the skies to present the next piece of evidence, which was infrared footage that Israeli police had obtained using a helicopter. Infrared cameras can detect heat. When examining a photo taken in the early morning when the weather is cool, it is possible to see that the flow is clear and white with no shadows. However, when a photo taken at night, after the land has been heated all day by the Jerusalem sun is examined, we can see straight lines between the trees, and the distance between the lines is 10 meters. This is particularly instructive when you consider that the width of the temple walls measured 10 meters by 10 meters, with every wall being precisely 10 meters wide. However, many people in Jerusalem, Jewish and Muslim, do not believe in Sagiv's theory and think it is utterly foolish. This closes our examination of the red heifer sacrifice and its significance. Drop your opinions about this in the comments. For more enlightening videos like this one, please subscribe to our channel and give us a like.